I'm always moved by the emotional holiday survival guide content for people heading home to visit with family. I want to use a personal story to propose something similar about navigating visits to your birth religion. Okay, so this analogy is imperfect, but there are some similarities at play. It's all about the calculus of needing to connect with history and maintain relationships without appeasing or complying with abusive patterns or politics. It's a balance between the need for continuity and the occasional necessity of rupture. There's also shared caveats because if you're not safe with abusive family members, or if your birth religion is a place of white supremacy or rape culture or trauma, it's best to stay away. It may even be an obligation to yourself and those around you that you cut and run so that you're more fully available to the present. So, this analogy works for those who are on the fence between leaving and returning. Like, you know who you have become and you know what your values are, and that holds you back from the old ways, but you also live in a fragmented and disconnected world, and there is a price for holding out against imperfect relationships. Okay, so here's the personal story. I grew up as a bipartisan Catholic. So what's that? In my early church experience, I first went to a left-wing social gospel church, and then I went to a conservative church. And as I got into my teen years in the 1980s, the rightward tilt of the church and everything else globally meant that the left wing militant flank was increasingly repressed and just less visible to me. By my early 20s, I'd left Catholicism behind. Too much anti communism, too many hypocrisies, collusion with fascists, terrible attitudes towards women and queer people, an utterly shameful role in colonization, and my family has been impacted by clerical abuse. Now I'm in my 50s and I'm too underwater with parenting to do political organizing or party work, and this makes me feel disconnected from neighbors, elders, makes me feel like an armchair pundit, a collectivist. But two things are haunting me from the radical side of my religious heritage. The first is this primal image of this wild, unhoused, migrant, maybe autistic, working class Jesus who comforted his comrades in a time of colonial occupation and who jolted his birth religion out of apathy and made love and self sacrifice the highest service. That story just doesn't quit. Second is the fact that the most Marxist take on Jesus comes out of liberation theology, which literally fueled revolutionary movements in Latin America in the 1970s. Now, the same conservative elements in the church that side with capitalism or ignore abuse or prop up fascists tried to suppress it, and so did the CIA. But what do you know? History is weird. Pope Francis comes along. He's a Jesuit from the global south, a big liberation theology guy with a science background who writes astonishingly beautiful letters about our ecological responsibilities. He invited indigenous leaders to Rome. He had lunch with trans sex workers. He came here to Canada to give a formal apology to the descendants of the First Nations people the church had helped to colonize. His mantra was todos, 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 or everyone is welcome, times three. And now Leo seems to be going farther and unapologetically turning the church into full confrontation with global fascism, with a concentration on the poor, protecting migrants, and strong anti capitalist messaging. So, if you are international minded, here's a global organization with deep and strengthening ties to the global south. A local church 5 blocks from my home where the pastor is Asian Canadian and people of all ages meet every day, and it's now under the guidance of a liberation theologian pope from Chicago, where Jesuits are leading protests against ICE facilities. There's a lot of good points here. Now, I don't have time, at least not for the next couple of years, for political meetings or canvassing or even much protesting. But I can drop in down the road and connect with my past and with folks I wouldn't otherwise connect with. And who are those folks? Well, they're part of a huge, messy, problematic, politically incoherent family with plenty of folks who are mean and petty or even abusive. And so this is where I come back to the Thanksgiving analogy. If the need for connection and institutional integration is higher than the need to leave it all behind, how do you manage going back or even lending a hand again? And I think this might be a question for everyone who has grown beyond their family's politics and birth religions, but doesn't feel free and clear of them. Okay, so what to do? There's two things I've noticed about my boundaries and capacities as I visit church again. And I think these might resonate with people who have moved on from Jewish and Muslim or other traditions as well. The political differences with some of your uncles and aunts and siblings, and especially the patriarchs, are going to be real. And you're going to have to figure out whether they're tolerable without losing your way or bolstering toxic ideas. Now, I think this is a political decision that's not so different from how you would negotiate participating in major party politics, like with the Democratic Party. And of course, it doesn't all depend on you. You have to find a place where you can openly say, Kamala Harris co-signed genocide without being tossed out of the party meeting. I got to find church people who will accept me after I say, you're dead wrong about abortion, and all the downstream effects of you being wrong are misogynistic. Second thing is, I'm a materialist. So I don't want or need any magic to make my life more rich. But this attitude can lead to some cringe moments where the person next to you in church really may believe that Mary is personally watching over them, and they would be offended if they knew that you didn't. Or they think that the host is literally the body of Jesus, and you don't need to, because bread alone on its own and eating together is holy enough. Now, this cringy tension doesn't really bother me anymore because I don't care how people gesture at the unspeakably precious things in their lives. And I refuse to look down on pious people as though they're stupid. Yes, there are literalists who use literalism to abuse others, but I don't need to be around them. And more importantly, I don't think they should be allowed to dominate the conversation. What do I mean by dominating the conversation? There's a statement on the Democratic Socialists of America website about their religion and socialism group. Quote, there was a long tradition of religious socialism in the United States that has been ignored or forgotten. The Religion and Socialism Group of DSA refuses to cede the ground of faith to the religious right. Now, that idea of not ceding ground is huge, I think. The Catholic Church carries an enormous amount of historical, institutional, economic power. And the less people like me are involved, the more we have to hear what J.D. Vance or Jordan Peterson's wife, Tammy Roberts, think Catholicism is. And not fighting over that space is a huge strategic error in my view. They don't get to convert and play around. In the family analogy, might be like walking away while your uncle messes up the whole family as he just gets further and further into QAnon. I know there are anti-Zionist and anti-capitalist Jewish groups. There are Muslim groups that focus on social services and anti-colonial work and mysticism. In every major religion I'm aware of, there is a radical, mystical, often communistic flank that rises and falls according to social needs and according to how vigorously it is repressed. So, religion itself is a landscape of struggle, in my view, and maybe the extended family isn't that different. At this point, the religion I was born into and know like a mother tongue is increasingly rising up to offer resistance to capitalism, and I find that very interesting and unexpected. I have a connection to 1.8 billion people through this heritage. And if I can participate in and help nurture the radical flank within it while feeling the grace of being connected to more people than I typically am, this would seem like a missed opportunity if I didn't explore that further.